Okay.
Zeus and Hera had many children. I'm not sure this is right. Was Persephone there? Let me just start over again.
Okay.
Persephone grew up on Olympus, and her gay laughter rang through the brilliant halls. She was the daughter of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, and her mother loved her so dearly she could not bear to have her out of her sight. When Demeter sat on her golden throne, her daughter was always on her lap. When she went down to earth to look after the trees and the fields, she took Persephone. Wherever Persephone danced on her light feet, flowers sprang up. She was so lovely and full of grace that even Hades, who saw so little, noticed her and fell in love with her. He wanted her for his queen, but he knew that her mother would never consent to part with her. So he decided to carry her off. One day as Persephone ran about in the meadows gathering flowers, she strayed away from her mother and the attending nymphs. Suddenly the ground split open, and up from the yawning crevasse came a dark chariot, drawn by black horses. At the reins stood grim Hades. He seized the terrified girl, turned his horses, and plunged back into the ground. A herd of pigs rooting in the meadow tumbled into the cleft, and Persephone's cry for help died out as the ground closed again, as suddenly as it had opened up. Up in the field, a little swineherd stood and wept over the pigs it had lost, while Demeter rushed wildly about in the meadow, looking in vain for her daughter, who had vanished without leaving a trace. With the frightened girl in his arms, Hades raced his snorting horses away from the sunlit world. Down, down they sped on the dark path to the dismal underground palace. He led weeping Persephone in, seated her beside him on a throne of black marble, and decked her with gold and precious stones. But the jewels brought her no joy. She wanted no cold stones. She longed for warm sunshine and flowers and a golden trussed mother. Dead souls crowded out from the cracks and crevices to look at the new queen, while even more souls came across the Styx, and Persephone watched them drink from a spring under the dark poplars. It was the spring of Lethe, and those who drank from its waters forgot who they were and what they had done on earth. Ramadius, a judge of the dead, dealt out punishments of the soul of great sinners. They were sentenced to suffer forever under the whips of avenging Erinyes. Hewers were led to the Elysian fields, where they lived happily forever in the never-failing light. Around the palace of Hades, there was a garden where whispering poplars and weeping willows grew. They had no flowers and bore no fruit, and no birds sang in their branches. There was only one tree in the whole realm of Hades that bore fruit. That was a little pomegranate tree. The gardener of the underworld offered the tempting pomegranates to the queen, but Persephone refused to touch the food of the dead. Wordlessly she walked through the garden at silent Hades' side, and slowly her heart turned to ice. Above on earth, Demeter ran about searching for her lost daughter, and all nature grieved with her. Flowers wilted, trees lost their leaves, and the fields grew barren and cold. In vain did the plow cut through the icy ground. Nothing could sprout, and nothing could grow. while the goddess of the harvest wept. People and animals starved, and the gods begged Demeter again to bless the earth, but she refused to let anything grow until she had found her daughter. Bent with grief, Demeter turned into a gray old woman. She returned to the meadow where Persephone had vanished and asked the sun if he had seen what had happened. But he said no. Dark clouds had hidden his face that day. She wandered around the meadow, and after a while she met a youth whose name was Triptolemus. He told her that his brother, a swineherd, had seen his pigs disappear into the ground and had heard the frightened screams of a girl. Demeter now understood that Hades had kidnapped her daughter, and her grief turned to anger. She called to Zeus and said that she would never again make the earth green if he did not command Hades to return Persephone. Zeus could not let the world perish, and he sent Hermes down to Hades, bidding him to let Persephone go. Even Hades had to obey the orders of Zeus, and sadly he said farewell to his queen. Joyfully Persephone leaped to her feet, but as she was leaving with Hermes, a hooting laugh came from the garden. There stood the gardener of Hades, grinning. He pinned a pomegranate from one of the few of the kernels that were missing. Persephone, lost in thought, had eaten the seeds, he said. Then dark Hades smiled. He watched Hermes lead Persephone up to the bright world above. He knew she must return to him, for she had tasted the food of the dead. When Persephone again appeared on earth, Demeter sprang to her feet with a cry of joy and rushed to greet her daughter. No longer was she a sad old woman, but a radiant goddess. Again she blessed her fields, and the flowers bloomed anew, and the grain ripened. Dear child, she said, never again shall we be parted. Together we shall make all nature bloom. But joy soon was changed to sadness. Persephone had to admit that she had tasted the food of the dead and must return to Hades. However, Zeus decided that mother and daughter should not be parted forever. He ruled that Persephone had to return to Hades and spend 1 month in the underworld for each seed she had eaten. Every year, when Persephone left her, Demeter grieved. Nothing grew, and there was winter on earth. But soon her daughter's light footsteps were heard, and the whole earth burst into bloom. Spring had come. As long as mother and daughter were together, the earth was warm and bore fruits. Demeter was a kind goddess. She did not want mankind to starve during the cold months of the winter when Persephone was away. She led her chariot, laden with grain, to Triptolemus, the youth who had helped her find her lost daughter. She told him to scatter her golden grain over the world and teach men how to sow it in the spring and reap it in the fall and store it away for the long months when again the earth was barren and cold. And thus it is that every year Persephone leaves her mother, but returns in the spring, when all is fruitful and beautiful and flowery. Demeter and Persephone. I love that story.
Yeah, beautiful picture. Turn it around. I'll scan it in, but yeah. So do you remember when this edition came out? When this book came out?
Well,
I know your mother was a fan of it as soon as it was released and was a fan.
she got it.
Others.
I think, let's see, what does it say here?
Well, she got that one for us. But you must have had a copy.
I don't know how different, when this book was.
Well, we just saw in your mother's book, when they were doing the twist
Oh, right.
at the ALA, that this book had just come out. So sometime in the 50s.
62.
Oh, 62. Okay.
Yeah. They also did one of Norse myths.
Yeah, and Trolls and Abraham Lincoln. That's they won the Caldecott for Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. Oh, they were quite wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't want that many.
I mean, and it's not hyper detailed either. They just have this style
I
that's
know.
kind of simple and captures everything, and a beautiful sensitivity to color, but they didn't rely on color. Their black and white stuff is just as powerful. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well,